Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Matt Wheeler. All yours, Matt.
All right. So in theme of the socks, it's interesting when I try and teach people the concept of like slicing it thinner. Um, I'll give you an example. If I were to come to, let's say, somebody that I want to open up to or talk to, and let's just say for sake of conversation that it's Scott, right? And I come to Scott and I say, hey, Scott, I have something I really want to share with you, but I am scared too, right? Now, Scott, being a normal human being, would most likely Scott, being a reasonably normal human being, would most likely say, what is it? Well, just tell me what it is. He would be missing the most important thing that I'm actually saying, which is there's something I want to share and I'm scared to, or I'm nervous to, or I'm afraid to, right? Because if you think about it, the thing I share with him could be anything. It could be, Scott, I have to move the webinar from the 4th Friday to the 5th Friday. Scott might be like, I was planning on going out of town and whatever, right? Whatever it is, the content of what I want to talk to Scott about, most likely he won't even remember in a year's time, right? This is just how conversations work. But if Scott tunes in to what I'm really saying underneath, it's that there's something I want to share, but for some reason, I don't feel comfortable sharing it. And if he is able to hear that and go, well, man, I'm really glad you're telling me that you're nervous to say something. And don't tell me what it is. Whatever you're nervous to say, don't tell me. I'm more interested in why you're nervous. Right? Because we might be able to fundamentally change our relationship if Scott can show up for me in my fear of opening up to him about whatever it is and why I'm struggling to open up to him about it. Now, this gets a whole lot more complicated and difficult in the more intimate the relationship is, the more history we have together, the more things that you and I share and we have to work through. So another example that I often share with people is the idea of, like, for instance, I might say to my spouse, I don't like the way you spend money, and I think you should spend money the way I money, right? Like, and you could tell that just if I were to say that, that's going to cause a lot of frustration, right? Like, oh, we should spend the money the way you think we should. And, that just sounds really controlling, which it does sound controlling. I'm trying to control the finances so that I feel better because it's scary to me, right? So, but if you start to slice it thinner, we might get to a place where, well, I've been scared with the way you've spent our money in the past, and I don't want to have to worry about where we're going to get the money for the mortgage this month, right? Okay, so then it's like, but if we go even thinner, it's in my life, I've felt a lot of insecurity around finances, and I feel like we wouldn't have so much stress in our relationship if we could figure out how to get on the same page financially. And what I really want is to have less stress in our relationship, right? And you get even thinner, you get even deeper to the issue, and it's like, our relationship's really important to me, and I don't like it when anything gets in the way of us being united and us being close and connected. And so I want to talk about some of the things that get in the way of us feeling close and connected, right? So it's like you realize I could have started with finances, but if I actually start with my desire to be close and connected, I can work out to any problem that we run into. It's not easy to learn how to do this, but this is what we call slicing thinner, to get down to those core. The core issues are whatever it is that's preventing you and I from connecting or getting close, be it my fear, be it, that the nervousness that I have that you're going to feel like I'm controlling, And so we want to start talking about those. Those are the most important things to discuss in a relationship, so that we can go anywhere with the conversation. So I don't think I have anything else, but I know that Scott, you have lots of good questions. Maybe.
I don't actually, but I think we will. We have a leftover question from our last go round, so I think maybe we'll bring that up.
So let me ask this real quick, Scott.
Okay.
If I come to you and say I'm really nervous, but I want to talk to you about something, why is it? And would this be your initial reaction that you'd be like, well, what is it? Let's hurry and talk about it.
Yeah, what have I done wrong?
Oh,
for me, I'm like, oh, well, what? Yeah. Oh my God, Matt hates me. He's breaking up with me. He's, I go to worst case scenario. So I'm like, I don't even care that you're nervous. The fact that you're nervous tells me it's like something that is going to hurt me or something that, I'm getting dumped.
And so you go, that's interesting. So hurry up and tell me so that if you're dumping me, I know what it is. Or if it's something else, it'll relieve my fear that you're dumping me.
Right.
So let's hurry and get to the content.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's really about how I've failed. That's what you're thinking.
Well, me, yeah. And I think,
correct.
I think maybe a lot of people like, or what have I done this time? Or, whatever. And
I'd be curious
if we have lots of conflict, but let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
I mean, when we slice it thin, do we ever get around to whatever it is you need to tell me?
No, that's actually, that's a question I hear all the time. People are like, well, when do we get to it? And I think that as I share it with you and you focus on my fears and concerns, I think naturally as I feel calm and as I feel connected to you and like you understand and you care, it's going to come out naturally. But I think we can also say, like you could also say, hey, do you feel relaxed enough that you could share it with me now? Or is there something else you need before you feel comfortable enough to share it? Right? Like you can totally lead me in that direction just by showing me that or asking me my comfort level in sharing with you, and I'll eventually get there.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. When you come to me and you say, there's something I want to tell you, but I'm really nervous, is it my responsibility? Do I have a responsibility to back away from my immediate fear and address yours? Like,
well,
can you tell me more about what you're afraid of and why?
The short answer is yes. It's your responsibility to back away from your immediate fear. And let me explain why. Okay. Because I'm the one that's initiated the vulnerable conversation, right? If every time I come to you, I initiate the vulnerable conversation and then you flip it by bringing up your vulnerabilities, now it's a competition of my vulnerability with your vulnerability and whose is bigger, whose is more important, whose is going to cause a bigger problem in our family system, right? And so it's not a healthy place. And I've found this a lot over the years. Traditionally, the individual who tends to withdraw from conflict tends to be the one that brings up conflict when the other person brings up conflict, or they bring up vulnerability when the other person brings up vulnerability. And it's almost like, oh, it's conflict time, it's vulnerability time. Here, let me pull out all my stuff too. And it's like, no, I asked for your help to organize this one box. And so I'm pulling things out of this box. That doesn't mean we're going to pull out all the boxes from around the house. I'm literally asking for this one box. And so, yes, it's your responsibility to say, you know what, I'm not going to bust out my box of issues. I'm going to sit with you in yours. And then I might ask, hey, do you feel good about what we talked about? Are you sufficiently resolved? And if I say yes, then you can say, can I bring out my box of stuff? Are we in a place where I can share mine? And if I feel understood and heard, I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, Scott, yes, bring out your box. Because usually, if this is how a typical relationship works, I'm the one bringing my box of stuff, asking you to look at it, and you're dismissing it all the time to look at your box. And
Right.
so I'm excited that you're bringing it out, because I'm like, why don't you ever bring it out when I don't bring it out? Like, why don't you bring it up for once? And you're like, because I hate conflict.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so, I mean, this, sometimes you say things, I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds easy. And I got to tell you, this one sounds insanely difficult.
I love that you say that, because it is. Like,
Okay.
it is such an incredible skill to learn. But when people ask me to teach them this, I teach it over and over and over. And literally I practice it with them.
Yeah.
Because it is that hard to learn how to do, because there's several things going on. I have to recognize you brought me something vulnerable. It helps if you make it clear, like, hey, I really want to share something, but I'm scared to, right? And then I'm like, ding, ding, ding. Oh, Scott's got something that's really important here. And I have to slow it down. And then if it hurts me, I have to kind of hold that off to the side and say, okay, this is Scott time, not Matt time. Right. And then I've got to follow up and ask, hey, does that feel better? Was this helpful? And you're like, yeah, totally. And I'm like, hey, can I bring up something too then? Right. Like, this is very difficult, but such a worthwhile skill to learn.
And it seems to me that underlying this is I'd better have enough recovery and sanity, and that my priorities are in order. Like, you know, I recognize that I care enough about you to let you be vulnerable without, you know, getting my own crap in the way. I mean, you know, as you know, I'll speak for me as a recovering addict. You know, my first instinct, even now, 20 plus years sober, is to defend. You know,
Like, to go to a defensive place within you.
Yeah, I'm going to get defensive. You tell me that something's up, I'm going to get defensive. I'm gonna mansplain it away.
Well,
you know.
It sounds like you're going to do one of two things. You're going to start out with what you told me. You're going to start out going, what did I do wrong?
Right.
Then you're going to move into defensiveness to try and prove that person wrong.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, because as an addict, the last thing I want to do is feel uncomfortable. You know, doesn't matter how long I've been sober, I still don't like to feel uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah. Most people, well, uncomfortable is a soft version of pain.
Yeah.
Right?
Afraid, and you know.
Right. Like, most of us, it was so funny. I was working with a PT the other day, and it was literally like, is this uncomfortable yet? And I was like, no. And it's like, okay, then it's not working, you know, like,
I'm not doing enough. Let me stretch it further.
oh, and I was like struggling to breathe by the time we were done. But at the same time, I'm sitting there going, why is it necessary that in order to heal, we have to be miserably painful?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and it's that same thing. Like, you're right. We don't like to be uncomfortable. And that's why most people have gone to an addiction in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's just to stay out of pain, try to figure out how to make life more comfortable.
Yeah. So you say you practice this with people all the time. Can we do a practice for
like you and I practice it?
Yeah, let's do a practice. So
Okay.
I don't know if you think it would be more enlightening for me to bring a problem for you, or for you to bring a problem, maybe for you to bring a problem to me.
No, well, it depends, right? Because I mean, it's hard to practice you and I unless technically we could come up with some actual conflict between the two of us, right? Then it becomes a little more real. But at the same time, it's important to practice so that people get a sense of what this looks like. So, but no, we can totally do it. But I want to do it I think we should do it the other way. I'm going to bring you a problem, and you're going to practice
helping you slice it thinner.
Yes, and let's see if you want. I like think about how you would typically go. Like, if we were in a typical partnered relationship, it might be something like this. Scott, lately I've noticed that you haven't been attending your 12-step meetings. And so if I wasn't slicing it thinner, it would look like this, right? Scott, you haven't been attending your 12-step meetings lately. You're watching more television, and you seem to be working later hours, and I'm not okay with that.
To which I immediately, being me, get defensive and say, well, I'm working later hours because we've been really busy and my job is important, and I need it so that we can pay the bills. And yeah, you're right, I haven't been doing as many in-person 12-step meetings, but I went to one online. And yeah, and I with all the work, I just need some downtime, and I'm staying sober, so I don't know what you're so upset about.
Yeah,
I mean,
which
that's my natural
and that's
response.
everybody's natural response, and I'm like, that's absolutely terrible, right? Like,
It is.
and here's the hard part: nothing you said is wrong.
But
Nothing
nothing
you
said
said,
acknowledges your pain.
right? So, and that's the hard part. You're not wrong. It's not terrible because you did anything wrong. Like you're a bad person. It's terrible because it doesn't work for our relationship.
Right.
Right. So now if I'm slicing it thinner, I might go to, hey, Scott, I've been feeling some anxiousness. I've been noticing a few of your behaviors. The story I tell myself is that maybe your recovery isn't going as well as it could be, but I'm nervous to ask you, because if I ask you, I'm worried you're just going to dismiss my concerns.
And much harder for me to get defensive. At this point, I mean, I'm going to say, okay, well, if I promise not to dismiss your, I'm going to make a promise, like I'm not going to dismiss you. Now tell me what's going on, and then I'm going to get so I can get all defensive on you and dismiss it.
Right. And
I mean,
so
that's again my natural response.
And you don't know what to do here.
Right.
Okay, so here's what you do. You ask me. This is where it gets difficult because there's a certain level of emotional intelligence that you have to tune into, right? Like if I say, hey, Scott, I've been noticing some behavior lately, right? You might want to say to me, well, which behaviors have you noticed, right? Yeah. You don't want to go there. I'm nervous that your recovery hasn't been going as well. And I'm worried that you're going to think I'm controlling, right? These are kind of the three things I threw out at you. And what you want to tune into is my emotion. Don't worry about what I've seen. Don't worry about me being controlling. Don't worry about my fear of your recovery. Well, unless you're going to ask me about that fear, right? So you want to tune into my emotion.
Right.
And that's what you want to push on. So did that help you at all or not yet?
Try it again and let me see if I can do it.
All right. So Scott, I've been struggling a little bit lately. I'm worried because I want to talk to you about something. And what I've noticed is that, maybe some of your behaviors I'm a little bit nervous about. I've noticed oh gosh, now I can't even remember what I said the first time. I'm worried that you're going to see me as controlling, and that and then every time you think I'm controlling, our relationship just goes to crap.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you telling me that you're worried. I mean, still my natural instinct isn't to say, can you tell me more about why you're worried? Of course, me being me, I still want to know what I've done. And intellectually, I get it, where I can say, can you tell me why you're so nervous to share with me? I'd like to understand that so that I can be more responsive. maybe we can start there.
Right.
That I get.
Right. It's so interesting because think about this. If you were to say to me, yeah, unfortunately, whenever I think you're being controlling, I get super defensive and our relationship does go to crap, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right. That right there is going to create a ton of safety for me because you're acknowledging that you agree that when you perceive me to be controlling, we both go to crap.
Yeah.
And you're owning your part in that.
Right.
Right. And so that's all you would have had to say. Okay. So now, not all you would have, you could have said a lot of different things there.
Right.
Right. If I were to slice it thinner, right, and this is where it gets really difficult because as a partner, if I feel like you reject me all the time, if I feel like you get defensive and dismiss me all the time, me getting vulnerable, which is what slicing it thinner is that I'm getting more and more vulnerable, is terribly difficult to do. Right. I'd rather things blow up and go to crap than me get vulnerable and have you dismiss me. That'll break my heart. Right.
So as the recipient here of the request or can I say something like it would be helpful for me if you will slice it thinner?
Well, one, if I
or is that like
if
just
I knew
putting
what
all
that,
the burden on you?
if I knew what that meant, maybe, right? Like a lot of times what I will do instead of asking somebody to slice it thinner, what I've found is that I need someone to slice it thinner when I'm confused or when I'm feeling defensive. I don't respond. I will say to them, I'll be honest, I'm really not understanding what you're needing here or what you're saying. Can you explain it to me so that I understand what's really going on underneath for you? Or can you tell me it in a different way so that I can understand what's happening? And that's like, if you knew me, you'd be like, oh, Matt's defensive right now. Right? Because that's the moment where I'm like, what I want to do right now is tell you you're a freaking idiot. Like, yeah. And that you're being stupid and that this is ridiculous. But I'm sitting there like tempering all of that, going, okay, this really doesn't make sense to me. And I need you to explain this more. Like, so if I hear you, you're feeling nervous because of things that I've done. Like, how often is this coming up for you? Right? Like, I don't know. Is this helpful or was that?
Yeah, I mean, we talk all the time about being curious. So you bring this to me and I say, if I'm going to be honest, I'm going to say, thank you for bringing this up, Matt. My natural tendency is to get really defensive.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I'm going to try to not do that right now. And I do want to acknowledge that, when I feel like you're trying to run the show, my show, it goes to shit.
Yeah.
So can you tell me more about just why you're nervous to bring this up? Did we cover it or just, or is there more to it? I'd like to actually understand because I want to have open communication.
Yeah, that's beautiful right there because you owned your side, you owned your part. And like, if you're owning your part, maybe we can get somewhere on whatever the current issue of the day is.
Right.
Right. But if you're not willing to own your part and you're dismissive, it's like, shoot, I don't think we can get anywhere. But if you notice in slicing it thinner, I'm owning my part.
Yeah.
Right. I'm getting vulnerable and owning how I impact you and how I affect you.
Okay. This is so hard for me. I think maybe men, I think maybe addicts, I think maybe everyone.
No, I think it's terribly hard for most people, but it's tough because it's such a critical part of conversation, right? If you come to me and share something with me, I need to be listening for what your need actually is.
Right.
Like, okay, Scott's talking about, something about the car and like the check engine light came on. Like, I don't know what he's talking about. Right. And I'm like, hey, I hear you talking about the check engine light. Like, Are you asking me to do something? Like, are you frustrated? Like, what's happening right now? Right? Like, I need to listen below the content to try and figure out how it's impacting you and why.
Yeah. Yeah, and that one's impacting me because my car is meticulous and it's perfectly maintained, and I have all the service records, and this is me, and you're letting your car go, and I'm worried that it's, I know that when check engine lights come on, it's usually an easy fix unless you let it go, and then it gets expensive. And the last time this happened, we had to buy you a new car, Matt, and it cost us $38,000 or whatever.
Right. And so really you're scared
And
of
splicing it thinner is, I've never been in a position where I have that kind of money to waste, and it scares me.
Yeah. And if I'm not in a listening place, I'm hearing you criticize me for how neglectful I am. I'm hearing you criticize me for not caring about you or my car or finances. Right. And so basically you're telling me what a failure I am. And the reality is you're not saying any of those things.
Right.
You're just telling
probably
me,
what I'm saying is come to me and say the check engine light is on in my car. What should I do? I'll take care of it. I'll take it. You drive my car tomorrow, I'll get yours fixed.
Yeah, let me help you.
Yeah. So, okay. This is if I am coming at this in a mindset of I am trying to repair my relationship. I am trying to communicate better in my relationship. I am trying to develop better emotional intimacy with my partner. This all makes perfect sense. But what happens when I'm not in that headspace?
Well, it is learning. It is learning that every conversation you have with your partner it really isn't about the check engine light. It isn't about dinner tonight. Every conversation really is about, like, how can I show up for you? How can you show up for me? How do we have a better life together?
Yeah, when we're screaming about, no, it's your turn to do the dishes. This is not what the fight is about. The dishes are like just not that important.
No, it's when we're having a fight about whose turn it is to do the dishes, we're typically having a fight about not feeling like we're understood or appreciated. It's about how we don't feel like the other person is showing up for us and we feel neglected, right? Like, and so if we were to stop and every fight we go, hey, you know what? It sounds to me like when I don't do the dishes, you feel neglected and I don't care about you. That has to be a horrible feeling to feel, right? I feel that too sometimes. So now we're having a conversation about what the real issue is, which is you not feeling appreciated or cared about.
Right.
So there's two things happening right now. Either the conversation is so engaging that nobody has any questions, or we're not touching on anything that somebody would be like, I have questions, please answer them. Because this is probably the longest you and I have ever gone without a question popping up in the Q&A.
Well, and that's okay, because I think maybe I'm asking questions that people are, because the natural tendency of a couple is to do the same old dance.
Oh, totally.
Fight about the dishes.
Oh, totally.
And we never get past the dishes.
And let me tell you guys, so it was interesting when I first started doing couples work with my wife. I had been doing a lot of training as an EFT therapist, and I actually was getting pretty good with other clients and stuff. And I went and did a training that happened to involve my wife, and she said to me in that training, and I need to be careful because I don't want to put a negative light on my wife. What she said was profound. And what she said, I needed to hear. She said, you are an expert at helping other couples with this, but with me, you suck at this. And the truth was, I was trying to say, I don't know how to do this with you. And I can see how to help other couples, but I can't do this with you. And I can't figure out why. And to be honest, she actually cut off us doing couples work at that time. And I just hunkered down and said, I'm going to figure this out. Like, I have to figure this out because I want a better relationship with her. And so I have become quite an expert at even doing this with my wife. And so she sent me a message the other day, and it happened to be over text. And I read it and was like, whoa. And I thought, oh, like, it took me a second. And I had to go, what is she really saying here? She's really saying she's worried about me because she's super busy with this stuff right now. And I could have taken it personal and felt like she was telling me that, whatever. And so I reflected back to her in a text message, which I don't recommend. If I understand you, what you're saying is you're worried about me and you want to make sure I'm okay. Am I getting that right? And she's like, yes. And I said, don't worry about it then. We'll figure it out. Do what you need to do. Take care of you. But had I not listened, had I not paused, I could have easily jumped in and get defensive. Why do I say this? Because I, as somebody who is really good at this, still have to slow down, especially with my wife and with my kids, and go, okay, hold on. What's actually happening here? What's really important that's being said that I'm not hearing?
Yeah. And this is I think the hard part for most people is slowing down.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of it's slowing down and thinking before acting instead of just reacting. And I know, like emotionally focused therapy, a lot of it is, okay, slow down, slow down, slow down.
Oh, totally.
If I hear you correctly, can you, I mean, is that kind of what, are you teaching us a skill from EFT in terms of slicing it thinner, or how do these mesh?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I try and teach people, like, early on when I was learning with this with my wife, like, it would take me, even though I'm an expert and I'm helping other couples do it in the moment, something would happen between us and I'd feel myself just escalate and want to like jump in and like argue or get defensive, right? And I'd have to stop and go, okay, you know what? I need to sit with this. And it would take me 72 hours, right? And in that 72 hours, I'm calling friends and I'm asking, hey, my wife said this to me. Help me see this from a different perspective. What is she really saying, right? Help me to know how to hear her. And then I would go back to her and I'd say, hey, we talked the other day and you said this. Is this really what you were trying to say? And she'd often be like, yes, that's exactly what I was trying to say. And then I got it down to where it was like 24 hours. And I could do it within 24 hours, oftentimes without even calling a friend. And then I would lean back in, right? And I'm telling you now, I can do it so fast, but it's taken me years of practice. Now, I'm not trying to discourage anybody. I'm actually trying to say, like, you want the coolest relationships ever? Like, one, it's going to sound weird, and my wife and I have talked about it, so this isn't a slight against her, but I single-handedly changed this in our relationship. It doesn't mean she didn't get into it with me eventually, but like, she wasn't willing to do couples therapy with me. She wasn't willing to do therapy, right? Like, here I am, a therapist, and my wife's like, I'm out. This doesn't work. I'm in a room with two therapists ganging up on me, right? Like, that's how it felt to her. And so I was like, look, it doesn't feel safe for her to go into therapy. Like, she's literally got her husband, who's the expert, telling her she's wrong. That's how she heard it. And I don't blame her. It wasn't what I was saying, but it's how she felt, right? And so I had to learn to slow it down and change that within our relationship. And she's told me, and it was the most validating thing. She was like, you put in a lot of work and our relationship has really changed because of that. Now, if I'm being honest, and this leads into the so far the only comment / question we've got, is that I was really emotionally immature.
Right.
Like, everything she said I took as an attack. Like, she couldn't tell me, hey, I'm really worried about the finances right now, without me saying, oh, are you telling me I'm a terrible provider?
Yeah.
Right? Like, she's like, no, I'm just trying to talk about the finances. No, you're telling me I'm failing as a provider, right? Like, it was like, so yes, there was a lot less emotional maturity there on my part. And really, if I were to say I single-handedly changed it, it's probably because I matured.
First of all, thank you for sharing that this took you a while to learn. Like you weren't born with this. Because
No,
I'm sitting here thinking, what is wrong with me? It's like, Matt has this down pat. I don't know.
no, I was a therapist.
Okay.
A trained professional. And I sucked at this with my wife,
Yeah.
right? Like, I could do it pretty well with clients. Now, this goes back to like understanding toxic shame and how it affects us, right? I was so rife with toxic shame, even as a therapist, right, that I learned pretty quickly how to not take it personal when my clients said something that felt attacking or criticized me. I was pretty good at it, but like, shoot, my wife or my friends or a sibling would say something and whoa, I'd be a wreck, right? Like, they're telling me I suck. They're telling me I'm a bad friend. They're telling me I'm a failure.
Yeah. And
I
and this is the childhood trauma that drives us into therapy, hopefully. Uh,
absolutely.
and this is why we react instead of pausing and thinking it through. And you know, and yeah, look, to the comment that we've got here, not sure this is a question, but it seems like a lot of emotional maturity is needed to do this. Now the question is, some people might not be capable, question mark. So let me ask you this: is everyone capable of developing the emotional maturity needed to do this? And then is everyone capable of actually doing this? Because it feels like a two-part process.
Hit me with the first question again.
Is everyone, I came in, I was basically a 13-year-old kid at 38 when I got sober. I mean, I had not grown up emotionally one tiny bit in the 25 years,
Yeah.
25 years of active addiction. Yeah, I started early. So, I was a 38-year-old, 13-year-old boy. It took me a while to just be able to feel anything without being overwhelmed and
Oh,
to accept that, like, I ask somebody if they want to do something and they say no. It's probably not about me, or maybe it is about me, but, or if somebody's nasty to me, well, I don't probably want them as a friend anyway. So why am I giving them so much time? That there's an emotional maturity. I had to grow up
right.
in terms of relating to other people. And that took a while. And there was no chance in hell I was going to be able to do any of this slicing it thinner and being curious about your feelings. And so, can everyone emotionally mature? That's question number one.
Okay, so let me answer that. I don't know. Let me now give you my opinion. My opinion is I believe everybody has the ability to emotionally mature, short of, brain damage, something like that, right? Like, and even then, I still think that we all have the ability to increase our skill set,
Right.
right? Like, and so now I'll give you a complicated answer. Like, for instance, I've worked with people who are diagnosable narcissists, like, not just they're an addict and have narcissistic traits. I'm talking about diagnosed narcissist. Well, the research is not positive, meaning it does not shine kindly on people with personality disorders, right? But I've still seen people increase their skill set. It's almost like even a sociopath can learn the skill set of empathy, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so I think we can all increase our skill set, and increasing our skill set is an increase in emotional maturity. It's us having the knowledge to apply a skill set in a certain emotional setting or situation. Now, do I think there are limits, right, to people's capability? Absolutely, right? I will never, nor could I ever have played professional basketball. Like, it just was not going to happen with my DNA. In addition to other things, right? Like, and some people are like, no. And I'm like, okay, you take a guy like Steve Nash, who was a phenomenal, I mean, he's a Hall of Fame basketball player. Okay, but he's also he had the athletic ability. He probably could have played professional soccer. Like, he probably could have done other sports. Did he have to work harder at basketball than somebody else? Probably. That guy was a gym rat, right? But he had the ability. He probably could have been a professional athlete in several areas. I don't have that. If I were to do a DNA test, it would tell me that I'm an average human being on my athletic ability, right? And so when you look at it, you have to realize I can work really hard and I enjoy athletics. I tell people I'm an amateur athlete, right? But I'm still never going to be pro level, right? So there is a certain cap to my capability. Do I have Matt, have a higher emotional maturity than somebody else? Might I be pro level emotional maturity? Maybe not though. Like, I don't know how to measure that, right? And so me working harder, can I achieve more than somebody else? Yeah, maybe, right? Like, we all have limits to certain capabilities. But do I believe every single human is for the most part, is capable of learning these skills and practicing them and improving them, therefore improving their relationship? I personally believe, yeah, why not? But to expect your spouse to have the emotional maturity of Matt or Scott, like, well, I don't know. I mean, there's a good possibility that's not true, but at the same time, I've seen people with, I mean, I've got a tremendous trauma history. I've seen you, Scott, with a tremendous addiction history, if you will. Like, and there's amazing skills that have been developed and an emotional maturity that's come out. So as a partner, I've got to figure out, how long can I wait? What am I willing to endure? What am I willing to accept as a limitation? Right? All of those things as a partner are really important. Like, can I handle that? This might be as far as my partner can go.
Yeah. And yeah, just to be clear, things like personality disorders are actually fairly rare. A lot of times betrayed partners will send emails, oh, my addict is such a narcissist. I'm like, probably behaving in narcissistic ways, but maybe not an actual narcissist. It's
right.
There's a lot of work to do to diagnose somebody with the personality disorder. And yeah. But what you just said kind of actually leads into this question that's left over from our last meeting, and I think we should do it because it does kind of fall in here a little bit. I have made a request to my SA husband, and he didn't honor it. He forgot it. What kind of work does he need to do to get that I need to feel like I'm important in his life? It feels minimizing that he forgot it and makes me feel unimportant. I do think he forgot, but I'm so sad and heartbroken that I'm not even a second thought in his mind. It was something that was a big deal in our recent history. So to realize it slipped out of his mind, how can I remind myself that I am worthy of being thought of? I have shared how I feel. He broke down in tears, but I'm not sure he understands how I feel. I think this is kind of really on point with what we've been talking about today.
Oh, it totally is. So it's interesting because one concept that I actually try and teach a lot, and it's really normal. I've had to learn it. I think everybody has to learn this. It's almost that idea that you can't place your self-worth on the outcome of a situation or a relationship. And so I hear that partner hurting for good reason. I wanted to be thought of. I wanted to be cared for. I wanted to be nurtured, right? And you have every right to be thought of, cared for, and nurtured. but what I also hear is, and because I wasn't, I must be worth less. And it's like, that's a normal response for all of us. It's like you telling that story earlier of like when I learned to ask people if they wanted to hang out and they would say no and I'd feel pain. Well, it's pain, it's rejection. But when I base my self-worth on somebody else's behavior, it's no longer self-worth. It's other worth, if that makes sense. And so is that an easy thing to learn to do? No. Right? And so what I have to learn to do is say, I know I'm worthy of being thought of, but I care about, in this case, my husband. And so I might ask my husband, tell me about your history about forgetting things, right? Like, has it always been that way? Is it only when you became an adult, when you got into addiction, when you're in recovery? Like, I want to learn more about your habit, experience, learning of forgetting things, right? You might be dealing with somebody, and it's really not uncommon for somebody with ADHD of some varying variety to be an addict. And forgetfulness is really could be a chemical imbalance. I'm not blaming it on that, by the way, and it doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't make it less painful. But these are all the things that I want to explore. What if their forgetfulness has nothing to do with me? It's allowed to be hurtful. It's allowed to feel like rejection. But my worth can't be dependent on it. So am I totally missing what you were telling me to answer in this?
No, I think you hit it, but I think I'd like to try to be the betrayed partner here and approach you as the addict.
Ah, nice.
You're the addict now. So
Bring it.
Matt, the other day, I mentioned that I really would, I feel uncomfortable when you're around your ex affair partner. It upsets me, and you agreed to not be around her anymore. You were going to do that, and we had this conversation, and I'm really scared to bring this up right now because I don't want to seem controlling, and I don't want you to get angry, but I do want to be able to discuss this with you. Can we talk about this? Because you agreed to do something and you didn't.
And do you want me to do this the otherworldly way?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I even brought it up right.
I could totally hear somebody who's been struggling with addiction could totally go to, you know what? I hate that you're never going to trust me.
Right.
Right. That might be, and there's validity there, meaning I'm allowed to be fearful that you're never going to trust me, that we're never going to get past this. Right. So, I love that, like, to be honest, the way that Scott said that was beautiful. But at the same time, even if I'm struggling with addiction and I'm like, man, I'm totally scared, you're never going to trust me. How I might say that is, you're never going to trust me. Nothing I ever do is good enough. Okay. That's me saying I have shame that I still get things wrong. And now, if I'm going to come from an otherworldly perspective, and what I mean by that is that I do not imagine most people struggling with addiction, especially early in recovery, are going to have the skill set to be able to do this. But I would lean in and say, I'm really glad you're bringing this up. And you're right. I did tell you I wouldn't be around them. And so it's probably really scary that you've seen, and that I told you or whatever. You probably had to discover that I was around them, and that probably doesn't make you feel very trusting. It probably makes you feel like I'm hiding things or I'm lying.
How it actually makes me feel is if you don't really care enough about me to keep your promises.
Yeah.
Like I'm not important.
Yeah. Right. And I've spent so many years not keeping promises. Uh, and I did that for all sorts of reasons that I can justify, but it wasn't okay. And so yeah, no, so really what's coming, if I'm hearing you, it may not even be that I spent time around them, it's that I didn't keep my promise and I didn't keep my commitment to you, and then that makes you feel not cared about. I'm getting that right?
Well, yeah, and it's because this would, it just happened and it was such a big deal and we had huge fights about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, how can you forget something that important? It just really makes me feel like I am nowhere near the top of your priority list.
Yeah. And it probably goes back to that feeling that if you're not at the top of my priority list, then I could easily just go back to acting out again, and then we're never going to have the kind of relationship you want.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I'm scared of that too, to be honest. I'm scared that that well, I'm scared that you're scared that we may never have the relationship you want, and that might cause you to hold back, or that might cause you to not trust me. And so what I want to do more than anything is try and convince you that I'm trustworthy and that you can trust me. But if I do that right now, it's just going to sound like I'm telling you that you shouldn't be afraid. And the truth is, I think you have every reason to be afraid, even if I haven't done anything wrong, because of the history. I've spent so many years hurting you that I don't know why you should trust me right now.
But
But
you did do, but you did do something wrong. You talked to your ex-affair partner. Why are you acting like you didn't do something wrong? So see, now
you know
here's
what?
where we get into the whole.
No, you know what? You're right. You're right. I did do something wrong. When I said that, unfortunately, I was just thinking, meaning I didn't act out. And uh, I think I get so caught up in like acting out is what's wrong. And that, like, if I can just not act out, you'd feel better. Right. Like, I think that's why I start to say things like I didn't do anything wrong. But I realize that me acting out is only a small part of all the wrong I've done. I've dismissed you over and over. And so I am trying to learn how to be accountable, and I am trying to learn how to show up for you. And unfortunately, it's going to take me longer than you want. It's going to take me longer than I want. I wish I knew how to do this better.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you trust me to tell me your fear.
The comment here is, dang, I wish my husband could do this. Black belt kung fu emotional maturity. And it is. I mean, this is serious, like grad level black belt stuff.
And I try and teach people this. Like, I don't expect you to know how to do this. Like, it's taken me years to be able to hear it.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I did. And so I don't talk about it. I don't think a bunch on here, but I could see how quickly I learned how to do this. I say how quickly. It took me years. And I went, it's because I'm watching people screw it up in session. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're not hearing it. So I ended up creating a couples group. And I have 2 of them right now where couples can watch each other work through conflict. And my couples who are part of these groups will tell me I learned so much faster. And I'm like, that's why I created these groups. Like,
Yeah.
you can learn faster when you watch other people screwing it up, if
Yeah.
I'm being honest.
And that works with groups of addicts too. I find it's like, I learn more from everybody else's screw up. I don't see my own screw ups. I can see theirs and then be like, oh, I did that too. So yeah, I would see why couples would, yeah.
And the biggest thing I can tell you guys is that practice this. I've a basic book to start with is I Hear You by Michael Sorensen. I've recommended that one before. Another book that I tell people that's a little higher level is Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And if you read that book, I literally read that book and I was like, I wrote this book, right? Like because I figured out how to implement it before I ever even read the book. He does a great job of breaking it down. Like, in my opinion, that book is genius. And I was like, this is stuff I've already practiced. And so you can learn it, but you got to practice, and it's hard.
So, okay, we're out of time. I'm going to get this posted quickly because I think the people who are here may want to go back and re-listen to this one, because this is fascinating. And
I was nervous that we weren't getting comments and stuff because it wasn't as engaging, but maybe.
no, everybody's still here, so that's pretty much a safe bet. So, okay, yeah, I mean, thank you. Killer topic, actually, I think. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for listening. If you have questions on this, send them in or save them for 2 weeks from now, and we'll definitely answer them. We will be here second week next month, but then not the fourth week. It'll be the fifth week next month. So I'll remind you guys again in a couple of weeks. Matt, thank you. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Fun dancing with you, Scott. I'll see you soon.
All right.